Number 1. The Great Emu War of 1932. In 1932, after World War I, Australian veterans were given farmland in Western Australia as part of a resettlement plan. Unfortunately, the land was arid and difficult to cultivate. Matters worsened when around 20,000 emus, large, flightless birds native to Australia, migrated to the region during their seasonal movement. Attracted by the cultivated fields and plentiful water, the emus began devouring crops, damaging fences, and causing significant financial loss to the farmers. The farmers requested military assistance, and the government responded. Major G.P.W. Meredith of the Royal Australian Artillery was dispatched with 2 soldiers, a pair of Lewis machine guns, and 10,000 rounds of ammunition. But nature proved more formidable than expected. The emus proved elusive and highly organized, often splitting into smaller groups and outrunning or outmaneuvering the soldiers. After several failed ambushes and only a few hundred birds down, the operation was deemed a fiasco. By December, the government withdrew the troops, and the emus had won. The so-called Emu War became an international embarrassment and remains a bizarre footnote in military history. Number 2. The Dancing Plague of 1518. In July 1518, a woman named Frau Trophia began dancing fervently in the streets of Strasbourg, then part of the Holy Roman Empire. Within days, dozens of others joined her. They danced continuously, without music or celebration. Some collapsed from exhaustion. Others reportedly died from heart attacks or strokes. Local physicians ruled out supernatural causes and declared it a natural disease, recommending more dancing as a cure. Musicians were brought in. Stages were erected. The city effectively enabled a dance epidemic. Modern theories range from mass hysteria, a psychogenic illness brought on by stress and famine, to ergot poisoning, which could cause hallucinations. The outbreak eventually subsided after several weeks, but the bizarre episode remains a haunting testament to the mysteries of the human mind and collective behavior. Number 3. Operation Paul Bunyan. The Axe Murder Incident. On August 18, 1976, tensions between North and South Korea escalated dramatically over a poplar tree in the Korean Demilitarized Zone, DMZ. 2 U.S. Army officers attempted to trim the tree, which was obstructing sight lines between guard posts. North Korean soldiers attacked them with axes, killing both. The U.S. response, dubbed Operation Paul Bunyan, was a masterclass in psychological warfare. 3 days later, a massive convoy, complete with 27 trucks, helicopters, F for Phantoms, B-52 bombers, and nearly 1,000 troops rolled in. Engineers, protected by special forces, began cutting down the tree. North Korea, observing the overwhelming show of force, took no action. The tree was felled without further bloodshed. The operation demonstrated Cold War brinkmanship and the strange ways superpowers could flex their might without firing a single shot. Number 4. Cleopatra was closer to iPhones than to pyramids. Cleopatra VII, the last active ruler of Egypt's Ptolemaic dynasty, reigned from 51 to 30 BCE. She spoke several languages, was highly educated, and played a pivotal role in Roman civil wars, allying herself with Julius Caesar and later Mark Antony. But what shocks most people is this. The Great Pyramid of Giza had already been standing for over 2,500 years when Cleopatra was born. The pyramid was completed around 2,560 BCE. By contrast, the iPhone was released in 2007, just over 2,000 years after Cleopatra's death. This staggering fact illustrates the incredible span of human history and just how ancient Egypt really was. Cleopatra was more modern, relatively speaking, than we often imagine. Number 5. The Bone Wars, Cope versus Marsh. In the late 19th century, a bitter feud erupted between 2 American paleontologists, Edward Drinker Cope and Othniel Charles Marsh. Known as the Bone Wars, their rivalry led to unprecedented discoveries and scientific disgrace. Initially friendly, the 2 men had a falling out after Cope placed the head of a fossil on the wrong end of an Elasmosaurus. Marsh mocked him publicly, igniting a competition that would span decades. They raced across the American West, hiring scouts, stealing fossils, bribing dig teams, and even destroying specimens to prevent their rivals' success. Despite their enmity, their efforts led to the discovery of over 130 new dinosaur species, including Stegosaurus, Triceratops, and Allosaurus. Yet both men died in obscurity and poverty, victims of their own obsession. Their story is both a cautionary tale and a foundational chapter in the science of paleontology. Number 6. A pope put a corpse on trial. In 897 AD, the Catholic Church witnessed one of the most grotesque events in papal history. The Cadaver Synod. Pope Stephen VI ordered the exhumation of his predecessor, Pope Formosus, who had died months earlier. The corpse was dressed in papal vestments and propped up on a throne in court. A deacon was assigned to speak on Formosus's behalf, while Stephen VI hurled accusations of perjury and invalid ordination. Unsurprisingly, the dead pope was found guilty. His body was stripped, 3 fingers used for blessings were cut off, and the remains were thrown into the Tiber River. The spectacle caused outrage, and soon after, Stephen VI was imprisoned and strangled. The Cadaver Synod remains a dark, bizarre episode in the history of the Church. Number 7. The Great Molasses Flood of 1919. On January 15, 1919, residents of Boston's North End heard a loud rumble. A massive molasses storage tank had burst, unleashing a 25-foot-high wave of sticky syrup. It swept through the streets at 35 miles per hour, destroying buildings and throwing train cars off their tracks. The flood killed 21 people and injured over 150. Rescue efforts were complicated by the thickness of the molasses and the freezing January temperatures, which turned it into a glue-like sludge. The incident prompted stricter building regulations and is still commemorated today. Locals claimed that for decades afterward, on hot summer days, you could still smell molasses in the air. Number 8. The CIA's Cat Spy Project. During the Cold War, the CIA launched one of its most bizarre espionage projects, Acoustic Kitty. The plan was to surgically implant listening devices into cats and train them to eavesdrop on Soviet diplomats. In theory, the cat would wander into conversations unnoticed. In practice, things went south fast. On its first test mission, the wire-up cat was released near a Soviet compound in Washington, D.C., and was immediately hit by a taxi. Despite spending millions, the project was declared a failure and abandoned. It remains a prime example of the eccentric lengths intelligence agencies went to during the Cold War. Number 9. The Year Without a Summer. In 1816, a massive volcanic eruption halfway around the world disrupted life as far away as Europe and North America. Mount Tambora in Indonesia erupted in April 1815, spewing ash into the atmosphere and lowering global temperatures. The following year, snow fell in June in New England. Crops failed, and famine spread. The skies were gloomy and red. Amid this eerie setting, a group of writers vacationed in Switzerland, including Mary Shelley, Lord Byron, and Percy Shelley. Confined indoors and inspired by the apocalyptic weather, Mary Shelley began writing what would become Frankenstein. The bizarre climate of 1816 didn't just change agriculture, it helped shape Gothic literature. Number 10. Napoleon and the Rabbit Attack. Napoleon Bonaparte, no stranger to battlefield chaos, was once bested by rabbits. After signing a peace treaty in 1807, he organized a celebratory rabbit hunt for his officers. His chief of staff procured hundreds of tame rabbits for the event. But when the cages were opened, instead of fleeing, the rabbits rushed toward Napoleon and his men. Accustomed to being fed by humans, they associated people with food. The cute stampede overwhelmed the hunting party. Napoleon reportedly fled in retreat. The Emperor of France had conquered Europe, but lost to bunnies. Number 11. The Real-Life Popeye. Frank Popeye Fiegel was a real man from Chester, Illinois. A bartender and retired sailor, he had a scrappy reputation and a signature look, a squinty eye, pipe, and massive forearms. He was known for picking fights and winning them, often single-handedly. E.C. Seeger, the creator of Popeye, grew up in Chester and based the character on Fiegel's mannerisms and toughness. After his death, Fiegel's gravestone was engraved with the Popeye character and a tribute to his legendary toughness. Unlike his cartoon counterpart, though, he didn't eat spinach. But he sure could fight. Number 12. Einstein's stolen brain. When Albert Einstein died in 1955, pathologist Thomas Harvey performed the autopsy at Princeton Hospital. Without permission, he removed Einstein's brain for scientific study, slicing it into hundreds of pieces. Harvey kept the brain in jars and even in a box behind a beer cooler for decades. He sent pieces to select researchers, hoping to uncover the secrets of Einstein's genius. The incident raised serious ethical questions and eventually cost Harvey his medical license. Some studies later claimed to find abnormalities in Einstein's brain, but the scientific value remains debated. What's certain is that the story of Einstein's brain became nearly as legendary as the man himself. Number 13. The defenestrations of Prague. Defenestration means throwing someone out of a window, and Prague turned it into a political tradition. The most famous defenestration happened in 1618, when Protestant nobles, outraged by the Catholic king's restrictions, stormed Prague Castle. They tossed 2 royal governors and a secretary out of a third-story window, roughly 70 feet high. Miraculously, the victims survived. Catholics claimed angels saved them. Protestants pointed to the dung pile they landed in. This dramatic act helped spark the 30 Years' War, one of Europe's deadliest conflicts. Who knew windows could be so dangerous? Number 14. The London Beer Flood of 1814. On October 17, 1814, a massive vat of beer at the Moo and Company Brewery in London burst open. The pressure shattered several nearby vats as well, releasing over 320,000 gallons of beer into the streets. The tidal wave of porter flattened walls, destroyed homes, and flooded cellars. 8 people died, some drowned, others crushed by debris. In a morbid twist, some survivors tried to salvage beer by scooping it up in pots or even drinking from the gutters. The disaster led to tighter regulations, but the image of a beer tsunami in Victorian London is unforgettable. Number 15. Tarare the Insatiable Frenchman. Tarare was an 18th-century Frenchman with an appetite so extreme, he once ate a live eel whole. He could eat his own weight in meat daily and was rumored to consume cats, snakes, and garbage. His jaw could unhinge like a snake's, and his stomach stretched grotesquely after meals. During the French Revolutionary Wars, military doctors tried to use him as a courier. He swallowed secret messages, but he couldn't keep from losing them, sometimes literally. After his death, an autopsy revealed his body was just as bizarre inside: abnormally large stomach, gullet, and esophagus. Medical mystery? Horror story? Maybe both. Number 16. The War of the Whiskers, Peter the Great's beard tax. In 1698, Russian Tsar Peter the Great visited Western Europe and decided Russians were too backward. One of his many reforms? Outlawing beards. Men who wanted to keep their facial hair had to pay a beard tax and carry a token showing they had paid. The token had a picture of a beard in the inscription, "The beard is a superfluous burden." Bearded men were stopped on the street and fined or forcibly shaved. The bizarre crackdown on beards symbolized Russia's painful shift toward modernization. Peter's reforms helped turn Russia into a European power, but not without a few hairy decisions. Number 17. The Night the Sun Never Set, Solar Storm of 1859. In 1859, Earth was hit by the strongest solar storm in recorded history, the Carrington event. Telegraph lines sparked into flames. Operators received electric shocks. Aurora borealis displays were seen as far south as Cuba and Hawaii. People in Colorado reportedly read newspapers by the glow of the sky at night. If a similar storm hit today, it would knock out satellites, internet infrastructure, and power grids globally, causing trillions in damage. It's a reminder that space weather can rival any earthly disaster. Number 18. The Ghost Army of World War II. The U.S. Army's 23rd Headquarters Special Troops, known as the Ghost Army, was a top-secret unit made up of artists, actors, and sound engineers. Their mission? Deceive the Nazis. They used inflatable tanks, soundscapes of troop movements, fake radio transmissions, and even actors in uniform to simulate entire divisions. One operation tricked the Germans into thinking Patton was preparing to invade France in a different location than Normandy. Their illusions saved thousands of lives and remained classified until the 1990s. War is deception, and the Ghost Army were its finest magicians. Number 19. The night the Eiffel Tower became a giant radio antenna. In 1910, the Eiffel Tower helped win a war before the war even began. During a military exercise, French radiomen atop the tower intercepted German military communications. The interception proved the value of wireless telegraphy. During World War I, the Eiffel Tower became a key listening post for Allied communications and a hub for jamming German signals. It even helped track German Zeppelin movements. What was once criticized as an eyesore became a technological weapon and a national icon. Number 20. The Sultan who outlawed coffee. In 17th century Ottoman Istanbul, Sultan Murad forbanned coffee. He saw coffee houses as breeding grounds for sedition, where citizens gossiped, debated politics, and shared poetry. To enforce his will, he roamed the streets in disguise and executed violators. Yet despite severe punishments, including drowning and decapitation, coffee drinking thrived underground. After his death, coffee was legalized again. It turns out, silencing caffeine lovers never goes well. Coffee ultimately became central to Turkish culture, outliving the tyrant who tried to kill it. Number 21. The corpse that fooled Hitler. In 1943, British intelligence created Operation Mincemeat, a deception plan to mislead the Nazis about the Allied invasion of southern Europe. They dressed up a dead body as a fake Royal Marine officer, complete with a wallet, love letters, and top-secret, fake, invasion plans. They dropped the body off the coast of Spain, where it was found by Axis-friendly locals. Hitler took the bait, diverting troops away from Sicily, which was exactly where the Allies landed. The operation was one of the most brilliant and macabre acts of wartime espionage. Number 22. The man who survived both atomic bombs. Satomu Yamaguchi was in Hiroshima on a business trip when the first atomic bomb hit. Burned and wounded, he spent the night in a shelter, then returned home to Nagasaki. 3 days later, he witnessed the second bombing. Incredibly, he survived both. Though he suffered radiation sickness, Yamaguchi lived into his 90s, later becoming an advocate for nuclear disarmament. His survival is one of the most astonishing and sobering testimonies of the atomic age. Number 23. The orphan who invented jazz. Louis Armstrong, one of the greatest jazz musicians of all time, grew up in the slums of New Orleans. Arrested at age 11 for firing a pistol into the air on New Year's Eve, he was sent to a boys' home. There, he picked up a cornet, and it changed his life. Armstrong's innovations in rhythm, improvisation, and tone transformed jazz from dance music to an expressive art form. His gravelly voice and trumpet playing made him a global icon. From reform school to royal courts, Armstrong's journey proves music can transcend even the harshest beginnings. Number 24. The Parliament Gunpowder Plot. On November 5, 1605, Guy Fawkes was caught guarding explosives hidden beneath England's Parliament. He was part of a Catholic plot to blow up King James I and the government in protest of religious persecution. The conspirators failed, but the shock reverberated for centuries. Fawkes was tortured and executed, and Guy Fawkes Night became an annual event with bonfires and fireworks. Today, the Guy Fawkes mask, popularized by the film V for Vendetta, has become a global symbol of rebellion. The man who tried to blow up Parliament ended up becoming the face of protest itself. Number 25. The Parisian who took the Eiffel Tower hostage. In 1925, a man named Victor Lustig executed one of the most daring cons in modern history. Posing as a French government official, Lustig claimed that the Eiffel Tower had become too expensive to maintain and would be dismantled and sold for scrap. Backed by forged documents and staged meetings in luxury hotels, he invited several scrap metal dealers to bid on the opportunity. One businessman took the bait. Lustig accepted his bribe, framed as a processing fee, and then vanished with the money. Astonishingly, the scam was never reported. The victim was too embarrassed to admit he'd fallen for it. Flush with success, Lustig returned to Paris weeks later to try the same con again. The second attempt nearly succeeded before authorities finally caught wind of his plot. Lustig escaped that time too, and would go on to con gangsters, forge currency, and elude U.S. agents for years. But he remains best remembered as the man who sold the Eiffel Tower, not once, but twice. Number 26. The Great Stink of 1858. London's River Thames had long served as a dumping ground for waste, human and industrial alike. By 1858, the city's population had ballooned, and the river had become a noxious, open sewer. Then came the heat wave. That summer, high temperatures caused the river's contents to ferment and release an unbearable stench. The smell was so powerful it halted sessions in the Houses of Parliament. Curtains were soaked in lime chloride to mask the odor. The public and lawmakers alike finally acknowledged what had been brewing for years, literally. The crisis spurred the construction of a comprehensive sewer system, led by engineer Joseph Bazalgette. His visionary design helped clear the Thames, curb cholera outbreaks, and laid the foundation for modern urban sanitation. The Great Stink, revolting as it was, forced London into the future and likely saved thousands of lives. Number 27. The Italian who built a fake city to save lives. In the chaos of World War II, Giorgio Perlasca, a former fascist turned anti-fascist, found himself in Budapest as Nazis and their Hungarian allies intensified the deportation of Jews. When the Spanish ambassador fled, Perlasca impersonated him, despite being neither Spanish nor a diplomat. He used this false identity to issue thousands of fake Spanish citizenship documents and organize safe houses under supposed diplomatic protection. He faced down SS officers, bribed officials, and even bluffed his way through meetings with Hungarian authorities. Through sheer courage and deception, he saved over 5,000 Hungarian Jews from deportation to Auschwitz. After the war, he returned to Italy, never speaking of his actions. It wasn't until decades later that survivors tracked him down and revealed the scope of his bravery. Giorgio Perlasca remains one of history's unsung heroes, an ordinary man who became extraordinary under impossible circumstances. Number 28. The Pirate Queen of Ireland. Born around 1530 into a powerful seafaring clan, Grain Ní Hale, anglicized as Grace O'Malley, refused to live a life confined by gender roles. As a child, she defied her father to sail with his trading ships. As an adult, she commanded her own fleet of ships, raided rival clans, and taxed merchant vessels that dared sail near her territory on the west coast of Ireland. When English forces captured her sons and brother, Grace took action. In 1593, she sailed to England and secured a personal audience with Queen Elizabeth I. Despite their vast differences, the two formidable women spoke in Latin and reached a compromise. Her family was released, and she continued her maritime activities into old age. Grace O'Malley's life defied expectation. Pirate, diplomat, rebel, she remains a legend of Irish resilience and sovereignty. Number 29. The Town That Changed Time. In 1947, as the U.S. pushed for nationwide adoption of daylight saving time, most towns complied. But Marfa, Texas, didn't. The townsfolk disliked the new system and voted to remain on standard time year-round. For years, Marfa operated on its own unofficial time zone. Businesses posted 2 clocks, Marfa time, and railroad time. Confused tourists and delivery men were often left guessing. Train conductors scheduled extra time to adjust for the temporal shift. Radio shows played at wrong hours. Mail arrived unpredictably. Eventually, the government prevailed, and Marfa rejoined the national schedule. But for a while, it was a proud example of small-town defiance, where the clock didn't dictate life, the people did. Number 30. The bridge that built itself and then collapsed. When the Tacoma Narrows Bridge opened in Washington state in 1940, it was hailed as an engineering marvel. Sleek and elegant, it stretched over the Puget Sound and immediately earned the nickname Galloping Gertie for its bouncy, rolling motion in the wind. Despite warnings from engineers, no changes were made. On November 7th, under moderate winds, the bridge began oscillating wildly, twisting like a ribbon. Spectators watched in awe as a car, still on the bridge, bounced with the structure. Finally, the bridge tore itself apart and collapsed into the water below. Miraculously, no people were killed, only a dog, Tubby, trapped in the car. The event shocked the engineering world and led to major advances in structural design and aerodynamics. Galloping Gertie became a textbook case of resonance and a lasting symbol of what happens when elegance ignores physics. Number 31. The Prince Who Never Aged. In 18th century Europe, whispers circulated about a mysterious man, the Count of Saint-Germain. He dazzled royal courts with his musical talent, linguistic mastery, and knowledge of science, alchemy, and history. But most curious of all, he never seemed to age. He claimed to be hundreds of years old, told stories from ancient Rome as if he'd been there, and often hinted he possessed the elixir of life. Some believed him a charlatan, others a time traveler. Voltaire described him as a man who never dies and knows everything. Despite, or perhaps because of, his strange aura, the Count moved freely among monarchs and nobles. His death was reported several times, and yet he kept reappearing in different countries. Whether immortal, delusional, or merely brilliant, the legend of Saint-Germain persists, a captivating mystery from the twilight of the Enlightenment. Number 32. The Samurai Who Wasn't Japanese. In the late 1500s, a towering African man arrived in Japan with Jesuit missionaries. His name was Yasuke. Standing over 6 feet tall, he caused a sensation in a land where few had seen a foreigner, let alone a black man of such stature. He was brought before the powerful daimyo Oda Nobunaga, who suspected his skin had been painted black until he ordered him washed and found it genuine. Intrigued by Yasuke's strength, intelligence, and demeanor, Nobunaga took him into service and granted him the rank of samurai. Yasuke served Nobunaga during turbulent times and was present during the warlord's forced suicide. Afterward, records of Yasuke vanish, but his legend lives on as one of the few non-Japanese samurai in history. A symbol of how far dignity and merit could sometimes transcend race and origin. Number 33. The invention that fed armies. In 1795, France offered a prize for anyone who could find a way to preserve food for its armies. Nicholas Appert, a confectioner and brewer, accepted the challenge. He discovered that food sealed in glass jars and heated retained its flavor and resisted spoilage, though he didn't know why it worked. Louis Pasteur wouldn't confirm germ theory until decades later. His method became the foundation for modern canning. Napoleon's troops gained a critical logistical edge, and the idea soon spread worldwide. Appert's invention not only nourished soldiers but transformed global food storage, making seasonal delicacies available year-round. The father of food preservation never fully reaped the benefits, but his impact is undeniable. Number 34. The jet that vanished and reappeared, maybe. The legend of Pan Am Flight 914 is one of aviation's most enduring urban myths. As the story goes, a jetliner left New York City in 1955 bound for Miami and vanished. No wreckage was found. The flight was presumed lost. Then, 37 years later, the same plane allegedly landed in Caracas, Venezuela. Tower personnel reported hearing confused voices from the cockpit, claiming it was still 1955. The plane refueled and took off again, only to disappear once more. No official records support this tale, and most believe it's fiction. Still, the mystery endures in books, documentaries, and conspiracy circles. Whether parable or puzzle, Flight 914 captures our timeless fear and fascination with what lies beyond the known. Number 35. The painter who fooled the Nazis. Han van Meegeren was a struggling Dutch painter when he realized he could earn more forging masterpieces than creating his own. His specialty? Imitating Johannes Vermeer, the revered 17th-century Dutch artist. Van Meegeren's fakes were so convincing that even art historians believe they were lost Vermeer works. During World War II, one of his paintings ended up in the hands of Nazi leader Hermann Göring. After the war, Van Meegeren was charged with selling national treasures to the enemy. A capital offense. In a twist, he revealed the Vermeer was fake. To prove his claim, he painted another Vermeer while in custody, under observation. He was convicted of forgery instead of treason and served a short sentence. Van Meegeren became an unlikely folk hero, the forger who conned the Nazis. Number 36. The spy who wrote invisible letters. During the American Revolution, one of George Washington's most vital assets wasn't a battlefield general, but a secret spy network known as the Culper Ring. Their mission: gather British intelligence and get it safely back to Washington without being discovered. Among their cleverest tools was invisible ink. Spies like Benjamin Talmadge and others wrote between the lines of seemingly innocent letters using a special formula made from ferrous sulfate and other substances. Recipients could reveal the hidden messages with heat or chemicals. These invisible dispatches carried crucial information: troop movements, supply shortages, enemy plans. In fact, Washington himself endorsed the method and encouraged its use. The success of the Culper Ring helped turn the tide of the war. Invisible ink wasn't just child's play. It was a revolutionary weapon in the fight for independence. Number 37. The prison that became a palace. In the early 1800s, Tsar Alexander I of Russia envisioned a model prison, humane, orderly, and a symbol of enlightened rule. He commissioned its construction with the best architects, insisting on elegant symmetry, clean corridors, and ample sunlight. But when the project was completed and the Tsar visited, he was so taken by the building's beauty that he changed its purpose entirely. Instead of housing inmates, it became a retreat for diplomats and elite guests. The guards were reassigned as servants. The cells became plush chambers. Ironically, the structure designed to confine became one of comfort and prestige. The only prisoners it ever held were politicians, though not the kind you'd expect. Number 38. The Great Boston Art Heist. In the early morning hours of March 18, 1990, two men dressed as Boston police officers rang the buzzer at the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum. Claiming to investigate a disturbance, they were let in and promptly handcuffed the guards and stole 13 masterpieces. They took works by Vermeer, Rembrandt, Manet, and Degas, worth over $500 million. The entire heist took 81 minutes. None of the paintings have ever been recovered. No arrests have been made. The FBI believes the art may still exist in private collections. Empty frames remain on the museum walls as a symbol of hope and frustration. It remains the largest unsolved art theft in modern history and a heist worthy of fiction. Number 39. The U.S. town that elected a dog as mayor. In 1998, the tiny, unincorporated town of Rabbit Hash, Kentucky, held a fundraiser in the form of a mayoral election. To everyone's amusement, a dog named Goofy Borneman Calhoun won. Since then, the tradition has continued. Dogs have held the honorary mayor's seat for over 2 decades. Voters elect their favorite canine candidates by donating to the town's historical society. The mayors make public appearances, greet tourists, and star in town festivals. There's no corruption unless you count stealing hot dogs. And best of all, there's never been a political scandal. In Rabbit Hash, the tail truly wags the town. Number 40. The king who ate himself to death. King Adolf Frederick of Sweden, a largely ceremonial monarch in the 18th century, met his end not on the battlefield or from a coup, but at the dinner table. On February 12, 1771, he celebrated Fat Tuesday with a feast fit for 10, lobster, caviar, sauerkraut, smoked herring, champagne, and 14 servings of semla. A sweet roll filled with almond paste and heavy cream, served in warm milk. Hours later, he collapsed from digestive complications and died. Swedes often joke he ate himself to death. Today, semla is a beloved dessert, especially around Lent, and always served with a knowing smile toward the king who couldn't resist just one more bite. Number 41. The Exploding Whale. On November 12, 1970, a dead 45-foot sperm whale washed ashore near Florence, Oregon. Unsure how to dispose of such a massive carcass, highway officials devised a unique solution: blow it up with dynamite. The plan was to scatter the remains for scavengers. But when the blast went off, it sent 8 tons of rotting whale flesh flying in all directions. A chunk crushed a car a quarter-mile away. Spectators ran for cover. The event became legendary when footage surfaced decades later. Today, it's taught in PR and engineering classes as a perfect example of well-intentioned disaster. Sometimes, a shovel really is better than a stick of dynamite. Number 42. The Great Chess Boxing Match. In 2003, Dutch performance artist Eep Rubing brought an absurd idea to life: chess boxing. The hybrid sport alternated rounds of chess and boxing, win by knockout or checkmate. What started as a satire became a sensation. Official matches popped up in Germany, Russia, India, and the UK. Fighters had to train both their minds and bodies. A single bad move on the board or a punch in the ring could end it all. Chess boxing may be a niche sport, but it's a living metaphor. Strategy and strength, brains and brawn, intellect and instinct in every round. Number 43. The Librarian of Timbuktu. When Islamist militants invaded Mali in 2012, they began destroying centuries-old manuscripts in Timbuktu, one of Africa's oldest centers of learning. Thousands of texts on astronomy, law, poetry, and medicine were at risk. Enter Abdul Qadir Haidara, a quiet scholar and archivist. With the help of smugglers, donkey drivers, fishermen, and librarians, he began secretly moving the manuscripts to safety, hiding them in trunks, carts, and boats. Over 350,000 priceless manuscripts were saved. Haidara's mission was not just about books. It was about preserving the intellectual soul of a civilization. His story is one of quiet heroism in the face of cultural extinction. Number 44. The Woman Who Invented a Life-Saving Syringe. Letitia Mumford Gear wasn't a household name, but her 1899 invention revolutionized modern medicine. At a time when syringes required 2 hands and assistance to use, she designed a one-handed syringe with a plunger that could be operated solo. Her design made injections faster, safer, and easier, especially for nurses and doctors working alone in emergencies. While her contribution was overlooked for decades, her design laid the foundation for the hypodermic syringes used worldwide today. Millions of lives have been saved thanks to her quiet ingenuity. Hashtag 45 break time equals 0. 5s/ the real sound of the Trojan War. Inspired by Homer's Iliad, German archaeologist Heinrich Schliemann set out in the 1870s to prove that Troy was more than myth. Despite criticism, he excavated a mound in modern-day Turkey and uncovered ruins matching Homer's descriptions. He discovered jewelry, fortifications, and city layers that showed destruction by fire and war, just as Homer described. However, Schliemann's methods were crude. He damaged several layers, likely destroying parts of the real Troy in his haste. Still, his work shifted scholarly opinion and proved that even ancient legends often had a core of truth. Number 46. The Bear That Joined the Army. In 1942, Polish soldiers traveling through Iran encountered a shepherd boy with a bear cub. The soldiers adopted the cub, named him Wojciech, and raised him on beer, fruit, and cigarettes. Wojciech grew into a massive, affectionate bear who mimicked the soldiers. When the unit was deployed to Italy, they officially enlisted him so he could travel with them. During the Battle of Monte Cassino, he famously carried artillery shells to the front line. After the war, Wojciech retired to the Edinburgh Zoo, where he lived out his days, often visited by his old comrades. He wasn't just a mascot, he was a brother in arms. Number 47. The ship that delivered the bomb and disappeared. In July 1945, the USS Indianapolis completed a top-secret mission, delivering components of the atomic bomb Little Boy to the island of Tinian. Days later, while en route to the Philippines, the ship was torpedoed by a Japanese submarine. Of the 1,196 men aboard, about 900 survived the sinking, but their ordeal had only begun. Adrift in shark-infested waters with little food or fresh water, the men waited days before rescue. Many succumbed to dehydration, exposure, and shark attacks. Only 316 survived. Because the mission was so secret, no distress call was acknowledged, and rescue was delayed. The tragedy spurred massive reforms in Navy communication and haunted survivors for decades. Number 48. The barber who saved Abraham Lincoln's life. On a warm evening in 1863, President Abraham Lincoln visited his favorite barber in Washington, D.C. While there, a man burst in, wielding a pistol and shouting threats. The would-be assassin was subdued by the barber and others before he could get off a shot. Little is known about the man, but Lincoln thanked the barber personally. Some historians believe this incident may have contributed to the president's later decision to carry a concealed weapon himself, a revolver he once showed to visitors at the White House. Though forgotten in most history books, that anonymous barber may have preserved the Union 2 years before John Wilkes Booth tried to end it. Number 49. The time a pope stopped a war by throwing a feather. In the year 1141, two armies clashed in a brutal civil war in what is now Germany. As they prepared for a final, bloody confrontation, Pope Innocent II intervened, but not with troops or threats. Instead, he sent a messenger carrying a single white feather as a symbol of peace. Both commanders were so moved and terrified of divine consequences that they agreed to negotiate. The feather became a powerful emblem of diplomacy over destruction. Though some scholars debate the event's details, it remains a potent legend that a war was once ended not by force, but by the softest thing imaginable. Number 50. The murder that sparked the Renaissance. In 1478, during Easter Mass at the Florence Cathedral, Giuliano de' Medici, brother of Lorenzo the Magnificent, was brutally stabbed to death by rival nobles in a conspiracy backed by the powerful Puzzi family and, allegedly, even the Pope. Lorenzo survived the attack and launched a fierce counter-response. He quashed the conspiracy, hanged its leaders, and consolidated Medici power. Florence rallied around him. In the years that followed, Lorenzo's leadership ushered in a golden age of art, science, and philosophy. He became the patron of Botticelli, Michelangelo, and Leonardo da Vinci. A single act of violence, meant to kill a dynasty, instead birthed the Renaissance. Number 51. The earthquake that made a volcano famous. Before 1883, Krakatoa was just one of many volcanic islands in Indonesia. Then, on August 27th, it erupted with such fury that the explosion was heard nearly 3,000 miles away, in Australia and across the Indian Ocean. The eruption generated a 100-foot tsunami, killed over 36,000 people, and destroyed most of the island. It released so much ash into the atmosphere that global temperatures dropped for years. Sunsets around the world turned blood red, inspiring eerie paintings and poems. Krakatoa became the first natural disaster covered globally in real time, thanks to the newly completed underwater telegraph system, marking the start of global media as we know it. Number 52. The knight who fought in 3 centuries. Sir Adrian Carton de Wyatt might be the most indestructible man in history. Born in 1880, he fought in the Boer War, World War I, and World War II. He was shot in the face, losing an eye and part of an ear. He was later shot in the hand and insisted on tearing off his own fingers when a surgeon refused to amputate. Despite his wounds, he returned to battle repeatedly, commanding troops in Africa, Europe, and the Middle East. He survived plane crashes, escaped a POW camp in Italy, and negotiated on behalf of Winston Churchill. He once quipped, "Frankly, I enjoyed the war." His memoir was modestly titled Happy Odyssey. Number 53. The Emperor Who Made a Horse a Senator. Roman Emperor Caligula is remembered for his erratic behavior and bizarre decrees. Among the strangest was his reported plan to make his favorite horse, Incitatus, a Roman senator. Caligula built the horse a marble stall, an ivory manger, and even fed him gilded oats. Some sources claim he hosted dinners in the horse's honor and suggested it could someday become consul. Historians still debate whether this was insanity or satire. Perhaps it was Caligula's way of mocking the Senate by proving a horse could do their job. Regardless of motive, Incitatus remains the most famous equine politician in history. Number 54. The map that invented a continent. In the early 1500s, German cartographer Martin Waldseemüller published a new map of the world. On it, he labeled a large landmass west of Europe as America, after the explorer Amerigo Vespucci, who had described the coastlines in letters. Vespucci never asked for the honor. In fact, Columbus had reached the continent earlier, but Waldseemüller's map was widely copied, and the name stuck. Thanks to one mapmaker's decision and a bit of historical confusion, the New World got a name that would define it forever. Number 55. The scientist who burned himself for truth. In 1666, Irish chemist Robert Boyle wanted to test the limits of human tolerance to cold. So he subjected himself to freezing temperatures, sometimes immersing his bare skin in ice water to measure nerve responses. He also experimented with air pressure, poisons, and even suspended animals in vacuums to understand respiration. Boyle's willingness to use himself as a test subject led to foundational discoveries in chemistry and physics, including what's now known as Boyle's Law. He was a man who quite literally suffered for science and changed it forever. Number 56. The lighthouse that was stolen twice. In the early 1700s, a Scottish nobleman, Sir James Campbell, claimed ownership of a remote lighthouse on a rocky island off the coast of Scotland. Displeased with its management, he sent men to physically remove the lighthouse and relocate it. Years later, another clan did the same, dismantling it again to claim maritime control. Local mariners, furious at the confusion and danger, revolted and forced the crown to nationalize all Scottish lighthouses. The bizarre feud ended with a new law: lighthouses would belong to the people, not private nobles. A light in the dark, finally shared by all. Number 57. The day the moon was almost nuked. In the 1950s, during the height of the Cold War, the U.S. military devised Project A-119, a secret plan to detonate a nuclear bomb on the moon. The goal? To show the Soviet Union America's superior might and to study the effects of nuclear explosions in space. Scientists including a young Carl Sagan were involved in the calculations. Thankfully, the plan was scrapped, partly due to fears of public backlash and the risk of damaging humanity's view of space. The idea was never made public until decades later, proving that even the moon wasn't safe from Cold War bravado. Number 58. The marathon that launched a legend. At the 1904 St. Louis Olympic Marathon, chaos reigned from the starting pistol. The course was dusty, the heat unbearable, and there was only one official water stop 13 miles in. The winner, Thomas Hicks, had to be supported by his trainers, who gave him a cocktail of strychnine, a rat poison stimulant, and brandy to keep him going. He hallucinated his way to the finish line, collapsing immediately after. One runner hitched a ride in a car for 11 miles before jumping out and pretending to finish the race. Another was chased off course by wild dogs. The event was so bizarre it almost ended Olympic marathons altogether, but instead, it became part of their lore. Number 59. The town that forgot the end of a war. In 1974, Japanese soldier hero Onoda was still hiding in the jungles of the Philippines, fighting a war that had ended 29 years earlier. He refused to believe World War II was over. Leaflets had been dropped, loudspeakers used, even relatives sent to call him out, but he dismissed it all as enemy propaganda. It wasn't until his former commanding officer personally traveled from Japan to relieve him of duty that he surrendered. Onoda returned home to a hero's welcome and lived out his days as a farmer and lecturer. His story became a legend of loyalty and the strange echoes of forgotten wars. Number 60. The Parisian who taxed air. In 18th century Paris, Jean-Baptiste de la Reynie faced a stinking problem: the city's lack of public lighting. To fund lanterns and oil, he imposed a new tax, not on wine or bread, but on windows. The more windows a building had, the more tax it paid, under the logic that more light meant more benefit. Homeowners responded by bricking up windows, forever altering Paris's skyline. Ironically, the air tax left residents in the dark and created gloomy, poorly ventilated homes. The law lingered for decades and inspired similar policies across Europe, proving bureaucracy can dim even the city of light. Number 61. The spy who wrote novels for the enemy. During World War II, British intelligence launched a secret plan to demoralize German soldiers using fiction. They created fake German-language novels filled with despair, disillusionment, and anti-Nazi themes, and then smuggled them into occupied Europe. One of the main writers was none other than Ian Fleming, the future creator of James Bond. The books posed as ordinary wartime literature but subtly undermined faith in Hitler and the war effort. These psychological weapons circulated widely, convincing some readers that resistance was possible. It was propaganda in paperback, and one of the most creative fronts in the war of ideas. Number 62. The day Niagara Falls ran dry. On March 29, 1848, people living near Niagara Falls woke up to an eerie silence. The roaring waterfall, one of the largest on Earth, had completely stopped. Upstream, an ice jam on the Niagara River had created a natural dam, cutting off the flow for over 30 hours. Locals walked across the riverbed, collecting relics and even cannonballs from past battles. Though the water eventually returned with a thunderous surge, the event remains one of the rare times in history when nature silenced one of its loudest voices. Number 63. The Viking who became an Islamic mercenary. In the 10th century, Ahmad ibn Fadlan, an Arab envoy, wrote detailed accounts of his travels through Eurasia. One of his most remarkable encounters was with the Rus, a Norse warrior people who had ventured deep into the Muslim world. Some Vikings, known as Varangians, became bodyguards for Muslim and Byzantine rulers. They adopted customs, traded across continents, and even converted to Islam in some cases. These Norsemen, often romanticized as isolated raiders, were actually part of a vast, interconnected world. One even appears in Muslim historical records as Al-Rusi the Russian. Number 64. The composer who conducted death. Ludwig van Beethoven began losing his hearing in his late 20s. By his 40s, he was almost completely deaf. Yet he continued to compose, relying on vibrations, memory, and notebooks to hear the music in his head. In 1824, during the premiere of his Ninth Symphony, Beethoven conducted the orchestra, though he couldn't hear a note. When the music ended, he stood motionless until one of the performers gently turned him to face the thunderous ovation. He wept. It remains one of the most profound testaments to human creativity and perseverance ever recorded. Number 65. The Japanese soldier who hid for 27 years. Shoichi Yokoi was a Japanese sergeant stationed on Guam during World War II. When the island was liberated by U.S. forces in 1944, Yokoi retreated into the jungle and stayed hidden until 1972. For 27 years, he survived in a bamboo shelter, living off roots and river shrimp. He believed Japan would eventually return. When he was finally found by local hunters, he resisted, thinking they were enemies. He returned to Japan a national curiosity and a symbol of duty, famously saying, "It is with much embarrassment that I return alive." Number 66. The tree that owns itself. In Athens, Georgia, stands a white oak tree that legally owns itself. According to legend, in the early 1800s, a professor named William Jackson felt such affection for the tree that he deeded the land around it to the tree itself. While the legality is questionable, the city honors the deed. When the original tree fell in 1942, a new one was planted from its acorn and designated as the son of the tree that owns itself. The unusual arrangement endures, a symbol of how love for nature can grow into legend. Number 67. The Great Fire that gave birth to a city. In 1871, the Great Chicago Fire raged for 2 days, killing hundreds and destroying over 17,000 buildings. Legend blames Mrs. O'Leary's cow for kicking over a lantern, but the real cause remains uncertain. Out of the ashes, a new city emerged. Architects like Louis Sullivan and Daniel Burnham led a wave of innovative design, giving rise to the skyscraper and modern urban planning. The fire became the crucible that forged a new Chicago, bolder, taller, and determined never to burn again. Number 68. The president who got stuck in a bathtub. President William Howard Taft was a large man, over 300 pounds, and the stories about his bathtub woes became the stuff of legend. The most famous tale claims he once got stuck in a White House tub and required the help of several men to dislodge him. Though the story may be exaggerated, Taft did commission a custom extra-large tub, big enough to fit 4 men. It was even shipped aboard the USS North Carolina for his use. While he's often remembered for the bathtub, Taft also served as Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, the only person to lead both the executive and judicial branches. Number 69. The doctor who performed surgery on himself. In 1961, Soviet Dr. Leonid Rogozov was stationed at a remote Antarctic research base when he began suffering from severe abdominal pain. He quickly diagnosed himself acute appendicitis. With no way to evacuate and no other medical personnel on site, Rogozov had only one option: perform the surgery himself. He used a mirror and local anesthesia, instructing untrained colleagues to hand him tools. Working in agony for nearly 2 hours, he successfully removed his own appendix, pausing occasionally due to nausea and weakness. He recovered fully and became a national hero in the Soviet Union. His operation remains one of the most extraordinary acts of self-surgery in history. Number 70. The time Pittsburgh rained made. On a summer day in 1851, residents of Pittsburgh were shocked when chunks of meat began falling from the sky. Witnesses described beef-like strips drifting down over a wide area. Samples were collected and examined, but the meat's origin was never definitively explained. Theories ranged from vultures vomiting their food mid-flight, a known defense mechanism, to mysterious meteorological phenomena. Though it may sound like folklore, contemporary newspaper accounts documented the incident extensively. It remains one of the strangest weather reports ever filed. Number 71. The woman who invented the modern bra. In 1914, a New York socialite named Mary Phelps Jacob, later known as Car Crosby, grew frustrated with the uncomfortable corsets of the time. Using handkerchiefs and ribbon, she stitched together a lightweight, backless brassiere. She patented her invention, now called the bra, and sold the rights for $1,500 to Warner Brothers Corset Company. They would go on to make millions. Though Jacob never profited greatly, her design revolutionized women's fashion and comfort, shaping modern undergarments for generations. Number 72. The library that saved a city. During the 1992 siege of Sarajevo, the National and University Library of Bosnia and Herzegovina was bombed and set ablaze by Serbian forces. Thousands of rare manuscripts and books were destroyed. But amid the chaos, librarians and citizens formed human chains to rescue what they could, risking sniper fire to preserve their cultural heritage. Their efforts saved thousands of irreplaceable works. Some books were hidden in private homes, others smuggled to safety. The destroyed library became a symbol of cultural resilience and the belief that words can outlast war. Number 73. The man who sold the Eiffel Tower twice. In the 1920s, a con man named Victor Lustig posed as a French government official and convinced scrap metal dealers that the Eiffel Tower was being dismantled due to high maintenance costs. He auctioned it off to the highest bidder, pocketed the cash, and fled. Incredibly, he pulled the scam again weeks later with a second set of marks, before finally being caught in the US for unrelated crimes. Lustig's boldness earned him a reputation as one of history's most audacious con artists. His most famous swindle? Selling what was never for sale. Number 74. The time the US invaded Canada by accident. In 2002, US military forces conducting a training exercise in North Dakota accidentally crossed the border into Canada. The soldiers, unaware of their mistake, set up a mock base in Manitoba and began performing patrols. Canadian authorities, initially baffled, politely informed the US that they'd accidentally invaded Canada. The troops quickly packed up and left. No diplomatic incident followed, only a shared chuckle between neighbors. It remains a harmless but humorous reminder of how even the best trained forces can lose their way. Number 75. The fire that saved the White House. In 1814, during the War of 1812, British troops invaded Washington, D.C., and set the White House ablaze. As the fire gutted the building, a sudden thunderstorm rolled in. The rain helped extinguish the flames and prevent the total destruction of the building. Some accounts even claim a tornado touched down nearby, scattering British troops and killing several. Though partially ruined, the White House was rebuilt on its original foundations, preserved by a freak act of weather that saved the heart of American government. Number 76. The king who took a nap during battle. King Charles XII of Sweden was known for his military brilliance and bravery. But during the Battle of Narva in 1700, as his vastly outnumbered army faced the Russians, Charles shocked his officers by taking a nap before the fight. He woke up refreshed, calmly gave his orders, and led a crushing victory against an army 4 times the size of his own. The gamble paid off. His confidence and nap became legendary, reinforcing his nickname, the Lion of the North. Number 77. The prank that launched a science revolution. In 1703, Isaac Newton became president of the Royal Society. A few years later, the Society received a paper claiming spiders use webbing to fly through the air, a claim most found absurd. But Newton took the paper seriously. He conducted tests, encouraged research, and spurred interest in aerodynamics and animal flight. The prank, now believed to be real spider behavior called ballooning, helped open up early studies of physics and nature. What began as a joke became a legitimate scientific breakthrough. Number 78. The soldier who captured 132 Germans alone. In World War I, American soldier Alvin York was part of a small patrol caught behind enemy lines in France. When his comrades were pinned down, York charged a German machine gun nest single-handedly. Using precise rifle fire and a pistol, he killed over 20 enemy soldiers, forced a surrender, and captured 132 prisoners. All by himself, he received the Medal of Honor and became one of the most decorated American soldiers of the war. A quiet man from Tennessee, York initially sought conscientious objector status, but when called to serve, he answered with unmatched courage. Number 79. The train station that hosted an orchestra for no one. In the late 1800s, the city of Cincinnati, Ohio, built one of the grandest railway terminals in the U.S. Cincinnati Union Terminal. Designed in an extravagant Art Deco style, it featured soaring ceilings, murals, and a world-class acoustic dome that could carry a whisper across the rotunda. But the station's most surreal moment came decades later during the Cold War. In 1952, local officials, convinced that the grandeur of the space should be preserved for more than just commuters, organized an orchestral performance inside the terminal. The Cincinnati Symphony Orchestra set up beneath the dome and played an hour-long set to an entirely empty terminal. The acoustics were so powerful and pure that engineers recorded the session, hoping to prove that train stations could double as concert halls. The event, dubbed the Echo Concert, became a legend in architectural and musical circles. Later, as train travel declined, the terminal fell into disuse. But thanks in part to that strange concert for no one, preservationists rallied to save the building. It's now a celebrated museum complex and historic landmark. What was once a temple of transit became a cathedral of sound, if only briefly heard by the walls themselves. Number 80. The Phantom Time Hypothesis, a century that might not exist. In the 1990s, German historian Herbert Illig proposed a radical theory that nearly 300 years of medieval history, specifically AD 614 to 911, never actually happened. According to Illig's Phantom Time Hypothesis, the early Middle Ages were invented by Holy Roman Emperor Otto III and Pope Sylvester II to place themselves at the significant date of the year 1000. He claimed they manipulated calendars, forged documents, and even created fictitious rulers, most notably Charlemagne, whom Illig believed never existed. His argument pointed to gaps in archaeological evidence, inconsistencies in historical records, and the complexities of transitioning from the Julian to Gregorian calendar. Mainstream historians roundly reject the theory, citing abundant evidence of cultural, political, and architectural developments during that period. But Illig's hypothesis gained a cult following and remains one of the most provocative examples of historical revisionism. It's a reminder of how easily the past, especially the distant past, can become a battleground of belief, skepticism, and speculation. Whether or not it holds water, the Phantom Time Hypothesis forces us to ask, how do we know what we know about history?